Podcast Answer Man, episode number 261.
Entertaining, educational, and encouraging content that makes a difference. This is GSPN.TV. Join the community.
Hey everybody, this is Gary Vaynerchuk, and you're listening to the Podcast Answer Man.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Answer Man. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and this, my friends, is the podcast about podcasting, helping you take your show to the next level. It does not matter if you're a brand new podcaster, if you have been podcasting for many years, or you haven't quite yet recorded that first episode. There's something we can all do to take our show to the next level. That's right, my friends, and today I have a wonderful episode lined up for you. We've got 3 questions. I'm going to try to answer all 3 of them today. I also have a wonderful interview with Michael Hyatt over at from michaelhyatt.com. He is the chairman of Thomas Nelson Publishing, has probably one of the most amazing blogs when it comes to leadership skills and taking life to a level where you are intentional about the way that you live. More than 200,000 subscribers to his blog. We're going to talk about how he got started, how he built his platform, and the fact that he has a new book out. And also, Michael's just entered into the podcasting sphere and is crushing it today, but not until after he actually, went through a couple different bumps along the way. And so we're going to talk a little bit about all of those things. But first, as I do each and every week, I want to start off with a random plug of the week. And this week, of course, once again, I am highlighting another member of the Podcast Mastermind. And this week's Podcast Mastermind that's getting a little promotion here is Mark Mason from Mason World Late Night Internet Marketing Podcast. Now, Mark has a great niche audience, helping people who are, basically working the day job, but they're looking to build something on the side. They're looking to build their online business, and they know they can't devote their full-time attention to it, but they're going to work on it one night at a time. In fact, each of the episodes does include helpful tips. It helps. They include interviews with folks and advice about how you can run an online business. And the cool thing is that Mark's actually doing it. He's actually sharing his journey along the way. And the advice that he gives is the stuff that he's learning and that he's applying and that he's living out, much in the same way as I got started with Podcast Answer Man, and I continue to move forward with Podcast Answer Man. But there's one reason I want to definitely share with you. One thing I absolutely love about Mason World, the internet marketing, late night internet marketing podcast, and it has by far the single best podcast intro out of any podcast I've ever listened to. I'm talking about the theme song. Now, normally I prefer a podcast that has a little music in the front and where the host is the first voice you hear. I really love the fact that, I just play music and then I pull the volume knob down a bit and then you hear my voice. My voice is the first thing that you hear in a podcast. And I typically prefer that about 9.5 out of 10 times. But Mark Mason definitely is somebody who has a theme song for his podcast that is just out of this world. And I'm going to play a little clip for you right here and right now.
You can do it right when it's late at night. At the end of the day, your dreams burning inside. So keep it up and you will find that you're building your business one night at a time.
You're listening to the MasonWorld.com Late Night Internet Marketing Podcast with your host, Mark Mason, building internet businesses one night at a time.
Hey, it's Mark Mason, and I'm back on the mic. And believe it or not, I am on the road again, and actually I am podcasting with a blanket over my head. Now, yes, that's right, I said a blanket over my head.
Well, there you go. And that, by the way, if you want to find out why Mark was podcasting with a blanket over his head. And I'm talking about sitting in a bed with his probably his digital audio recorder. He probably had the Adderall recorder or the Roland recorder with a big old blanket over top of his head. And if you want to find out why, then you'll have to listen to a little bit more of that audio from episode 25, which, by the way, you can find the Mason World podcast over at masonworld.com. Just go over to masonworld.com, click podcast up in the nav menu, and check it out. If you like the podcast, then be sure to tell Mark that you heard about him from the podcast Answer Man. I really appreciate it. Anyway, and by the way, I just want to highlight real quickly here. Many times I have strong feelings about just about everything. I really do. I have a lot of opinions, and a lot of them I feel very strongly about. And one of the things that I do feel very strongly about is having your voice be that first thing that people hear. And I'm not a huge fan of having intro theme songs or, having somebody else do a professional voiceover to introduce your show. But there are exceptions, and Mark Mason's podcast is one of those exceptions. And by the way, there's been, out of all the clients that I've worked with one-on-one, and we're talking several hundred clients, we're closely approaching 1,000 now, but out of all of them, probably about 15 of them have intros that were done that are professionally recorded, whether it be a jingle like he has, and I think he went through Jeff Smith, which actually I think he learned about in a prior episode of Podcast Answer Man. Jeff Smith does wonderful work. But anyway, whether you have somebody do a professional jingle for you, or if it's just music and you have somebody else, some other professional voice actor do the name of the podcast with your host and introducing you. I've probably seen, out of all of the clients, about 10 or 15 of them that I feel like, yeah, you know what? Forget what I said. Go with that. That's awesome. But most of the time, it's like, I don't know. I think you'd be better off just, introing yourself. I think you have what it takes. So, and not that Mark doesn't, by the way. Anyway, let's move on. The next thing I want to bring up is back in episode number 256 of Podcast Answer Man. You guys will remember that I told you that iTunes changed their spec page. Podcasting specs, they actually list out all the different things that to get listed and into the iTunes directory. Here are the things that you need to know about podcasting. Of course, if you've hired me as a coach or a consultant, or if you have taken, a lot of my tutorials, you don't need to really worry about all of those specs and stuff like that, because I walk you through all of it. But here's the thing. In episode 256, I announced to everyone that they changed their requirement, or actually not the requirement, they have changed their recommendation from 600 by 600 pixel artwork for your podcast to 1200 by 1200. Now, I say that this is a suggestion, and it is a suggested thing that they had said. Now, the requirement comes in that if you want your podcast to be featured in iTunes, then it has to be that larger size. Well, I am not kidding you, my friends. I actually know for a fact, and I've verified with several other people, that when I told you that, when I recorded that episode, the iTunes specs did say 1200 by 1200. But then I learned from my good friends over at Blueberry and Raw Voice that when they were actually finalizing the next version of PowerPress, they actually were notified by iTunes that says, hey, this is great. You guys are doing a great job. By the way, we're thinking about changing that to 1400 by 1400 artwork instead of 1200 by 1200. And the very next day, the iTunes spec page changed again. So now they're telling you 14 by 1400 podcast artwork, pixel podcast artwork for your show. And again, this is a recommendation for those of you who still only have your 300 by 300 artwork. You're going to be fine. You're not going to get kicked out. For those of you who have smaller artwork and you're submitting your podcast, it's not a big deal. You'll still get approved. You'll still get listed. The only thing is you will not be featured as a podcast, a feature on the iTunes podcasting directory. And that doesn't mean that you're excluded from the top 10 list or anything like that. We're just talking about where a feature, where they put you front and center in front of everything. So anyway, the thing is that artwork is getting bigger and bigger. The requests are higher and higher. And I personally want to apologize to anybody who went out and got all their artwork upgraded to 1200 by 1200 after hearing my episode. I personally had all of mine upgraded to 1200 by 1200. And guess what? Now it's 1400 by 1400. So I have to go back to the drawing board again. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this stuff, if you want to do professional stuff, you don't just do it yourself in Photoshop. You're maybe hiring somebody else to do it. Tim Arthur is in the chat room that says the new update to Blueberry is asking for 1600 by 1600. Now, I did an interview with Angelo Mandato yesterday for Podcast Answer Man. In fact, it was supposed to be included in this episode. And Angelo, who is the person who actually wrote the Blueberry PowerPress plugin, we had, unless things changed since my call with him yesterday, the Blueberry podcast plugin should be asking you for 1400 by 1400 artwork. And he was actually going to check into something that I had brought up in the talk with him about maybe it rejecting or giving an error. And I'm pretty sure that it's not an error. It's just a warning notice that it's, hey, this, they want bigger, but they are accepting your artwork. So if you go in there and you upload your new artwork, 1200 by 1200, and it says this is not big enough, we want 1400 by 1400. Trust me, it did take the new 1200 by 1200 artwork, but it is just giving you that warning that iTunes is asking for larger. And it does look like an error. It does look like it's been rejected, but it hasn't. I hope to get that interview with Angelo into next week's episode of Podcast Answer Man. And by the way, for those of you who are interested, if you're looking for somebody to create artwork for you, I will tell you right now, you could go to logotournament.com, 99designs.com, all of those places. Honestly, you're going to get some great stuff as far as logos are concerned. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to custom podcast artwork or even custom headers for your website, there is nobody else that I refer people to more than I do Jenny Hampson. Jenny Hampson is somebody who's a part of the GSPN.TV community. GSPN.TV is my own network of podcasts, Podcast Answer Man included in that. Anyway, Jenny has been doing my podcast artwork for years, and she has done a lot more recently with clients that I've worked with, and I have never referred anyone to her that was not 100% satisfied with the awesome work that she does. In fact, you can go over to podcastanswerman.com/Jenny H and see some of her artwork. And if you do contact her to do some artwork, she's given a very special price of $175. Just tell her that you heard about her from Podcast Answer Man, and she will do your artwork for $175. Just tell her that you would like a 14 by 1400 artwork, and who knows, maybe go ahead and have it done in 2800 by 2800 and have it sized down. I have no idea at this point, but the iTunes specs, as I last checked them, said 1400 by 1400. If you want to, she is the best. Anyway, so with that, I am going to turn to some questions because I certainly want to get to this Michael Hyatt interview. The first question, actually the first two questions, comes in from Tommy Kendrick. And just want to remind folks, when you call in, I do prefer one question per phone call. I don't mind if you call 8 times with 8 questions. Totally cool. But it helps me to fit in more people's voices and get more questions in when I can do it one question per call. But no problem at all. Tommy Kendrick does have 2 questions for us. They're 2 very valuable questions, and I'm going to take my shot at answering both of them. So Tommy, take it away.
Hey Cliff, this is Tommy Kendrick in Austin, Texas. I am now 8 episodes into the Actors Talk podcast, and I'm wondering, is there a way to judge, given all the variables involved, can you judge how many episodes that are being downloaded is a good number? I think I'm doing okay, but I don't know what the numbers mean at this point. Number 2, is there a way, or is it even a good idea, to include 2 audio files with a podcast? My interviews are going 45 minutes or so. I'm wondering if I should be including a shorter version and a longer version. Is that possible? Is there a sweet spot for the time length of an interview for a podcast? What do you think about that? Thanks, Cliff. Appreciate all the help. I would not be doing this podcast if not for the Podcast Answer Man, so thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.
Tommy, thank you for the questions, my friend. And I'm going to answer your second question first. 45-minute interviews. Should you break it down, include a shorter version and a longer version? And my personal answer to you, and it's one of those things that I feel very strongly about, is no. Include the whole interview. I'm going to give you an example of somebody that used to do this. Somebody who I actually look up to. I really like him a lot. Jason Van Orden, good friend of mine. But I remember listening to an episode of Internet Business Mastery probably about, this probably would have been about 6 years ago. And he had done a interview with the guy behind Copy Blogger. And it was a very valuable interview. And what they did is they took and they included about 20 minutes of an hour-long interview inside of their podcast. And they said, hey, if you want the rest, go to the website and this is where you can go find it. And that was so frustrating to me because that interview was so amazing. I wanted to hear everything that they had to offer, but they only included 20 minutes of it and says, you know what, we didn't want to include the whole thing. Or maybe it was, tied into, go here, give us the email address. I don't know what the mindset behind not including the whole interview. But there are some people who I've also seen, and this isn't Jason, but I've seen other people do this, where they just feel like, you know what, I'm not going to put a whole 90-minute interview in a podcast episode. I'm going to break it up into 2 episodes. I'll give you the first half this week and the second half next week. That drives me crazy too, especially if I'm listening to your podcast episodes as they come out. So my own preference is that if you have an interview, my own preference and my strong feeling is that you should include the entire interview in the entire podcast in one episode. Now, if it's a 90-minute interview, you may ask yourself, is there a bit of editing I can do to cut this down? Is there any non-essential information that was covered? Did we go through a couple rat holes, that we just didn't need to go down? I mean, there are all kinds of things that you could do to shorten that if necessary. And if not, here's the thing. If from the beginning to the end, you have a 90-minute interview and your show's normally 20 minutes in length, occasionally having a 90-minute interview, if the entire interview is pure awesomeness, if you will, if it is pure can't live without content, then my suggestion, I don't care if your episode is 20 to 35 minutes every single week, 1 week, 90-minute interview, not the end of the world. Because guess what? If people look into it and they listen to it and they're not captivated within the first, 10 minutes of the conversation, they can always turn it off and move on to the next episode next week. So that's my recommendation. But I really do not like the idea of breaking it up into 2 episodes. I really do not like the idea of only including a teaser of it and then asking people to go to your website to do more. I think you ask too much when you do that. So as far as, is there a sweet spot for interviews? Certainly no more than an hour, I think, is what I would typically say is acceptable. But at the same time, there have been people that I've listened to interviews with the person that they're interviewing, and man, I could have listened to another 2 or 3 hours, and I hated the fact that the time was up and that the podcast has ended. So no, I don't think there is any given rule for this. The question is can you cut out any of the can't live without stuff? The fluff. And so that's my thoughts. I hope that answers your question. Now, to your first question, wow, is this a can of worms? How many downloads is a good number of downloads for my podcast? Well, you know what? For me, when I started podcasting, I podcasted about the television show Lost for my first episode, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to download this. I know at least, probably about 5 to 10 or maybe 15 other true geeks who also like Lost and listen to other Lost podcasts, or they're Lost podcasters themselves. I figured I might be able to get 5, 10, 15 people to download my first episode. Now, thankfully, I was wrong. I actually got a lot more, but that's not always the case. Now, the thing is I would have been happy with 5. I would have been happy with 15. I would have been happy with 20, because you know what? I come from the background of, life before the social web, life before the tens of thousands, life before the hundreds of thousands. I lived offline for quite a while prior to entering into this online world, back in, bringing the internet to us and bringing the whole world to our microphone. So here's the deal. One of the things for me is I used to be involved in ministry very heavily. Actually, I hate to even use that phrase, because I still involve myself in ministry. It's just I involve myself in ministry in a very different way. But for those who don't know this, my history is I used to be an associate pastor of a small Nazarene church. And then I was in a small Nazarene church, let's put it this way, an average congregation size, 50 to 150. A larger church is 400 to 800. And if you had a Nazarene church with 2,000 people in it, on a 2,000 to 6,000, that's a mega church. Now I left there to go to a much larger church, that had 4,000 or 5,000 members that showed up on the weekends and stuff like that. And I would preach to as little as 20 to 30 people, as much as 4,000 or 5,000 people. And I will tell you right now that from my experience, and especially before I went to the larger church, in the Nazarene churches, it was not uncommon for people who are pastors their entire lives to never speak and influence more than 150 people their entire life, from the time they start ministry until they reach their 70s or 80s or whatever. And they're still, their congregation has never really broken beyond that 150 to 200 people that show up every Sunday morning to listen to the sermon that they put together. And when I think of that, it's like, man, gosh, just imagine if you could launch a podcast and you got 50, let's just say you got 25 people listening to you. Well, you have to ask yourself, what does the number 25 represent? The number 25 represents 25 people, 25 human beings, 25 people who are listening to every word you say. And they're not just there because they feel guilty, because they feel obligated to show up. Because guess what? Everybody who's listening to your podcast is listening because they chose to do so. So I would say if you had 25 people subscribe to listening to every single podcast episode you've produced for the last 8 to 10 weeks, that is much better. Those 25 people are as much better than the 200 that show up on Sunday morning at most churches. You actually are having a greater deal of influence on those 25 people most of the time. So how many is a good number? It really depends on what your goals are and how valuable individuals are to you, or is a big number the most important thing? Now, there's nothing wrong with big numbers. I want to increase my reach. I want to reach hundreds of thousands of podcasters. But am I okay with 6,000 or 7,000 podcasters right now? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with 6,000 or 7,000 podcasters who listen to me on a weekly basis, and that's huge. I mean, for me, do I need to reach 100,000 people to really make a difference in the world of podcasting? No, even if I only reached 800 podcasters. And that's it. Only 800 podcasters. Well, that's 800 people who are podcasting, who are having an influence on other people. So for me, numbers have never really been the focus. And what's the right number? What's good? What should my numbers be by a certain time? There is no standard. I literally know people who have already built a platform for themselves, who launch a podcast, and within the first couple of weeks, they have, approximately 9,000 to 13,000 downloads per episode. I know people who have started a podcast and they didn't have an online brand. They had not been working on building a platform for themselves prior to their first episode. And I know people who by the 53rd episode usually are running right around 80 to 120 subscribers to their podcast. After 50 weeks, after a year, they've got about 80 subscribers. But you know what? Is it possible for somebody who has been podcasting for 1 year to be very satisfied as far as what they're accomplishing in their podcasting with 80 subscribers? Well, again, it depends on how valuable. In my mind, here's what I suggest as a podcaster. This is what I suggest that you do. Even if you're not a person of faith or whatever the case may be. Why don't you go and chances are within 5 miles of you, there's a little small town church within driving distance. I want you to go there. And after the service, I want you to just walk up to the front and I want you to count the number of seats in there and then take the number of people who are listening to your podcast and imagining that many seats filled. And just imagine those people coming to listen to your podcast every single week. When you're behind the microphone, it's like they're all sitting out there. That's huge. That's huge. Like I said, I think it's all about perspective. And I think if you focus on the people who are listening versus the number of people listening, then I think that you'll build the relationships that are so important and vital to help take you and your brand and your message and your influence to a whole new level. Okay? So I just really want to recommend that you really focus on the individuals who are listening and not the number of people listening. That's my recommendation. It always has been, and as far as I can tell, it always will be. And I don't think there is a certain number that you should be striving for. Although there is nothing wrong with setting goals for yourself to take it to the next level. To say, if I'm reaching 5,000 to 6,000 right now, then I want to say by the end of this year, I would love to actually expand my reach to 10,000. And what can I do to do that? Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't let it consume you. That's my recommendation. And well, my friends, I'll tell you what, I really was going to try to fit in a third question. Just so you know, Spencer, I know that you're out there and you're waiting to find out about my thoughts on managing multiple brands. I will see if I can't include that in episode number 262 next week on Podcast Answer Man. But before I play the interview from Michael Hyatt, I do want to give you guys an update. You'll remember back on April 21st, I decided, after several years of not asking anyone to ever leave me a review in iTunes and to give us a rating for the Podcast Answer Man podcast, you guys have, I decided to start asking, and you guys have been great. And I real quickly want to give you an update. When I started asking on April 21st, we were at 35 ratings. Those are the actual 5-star ratings or whatever. We had 35 ratings in iTunes. Now we have 65. So within the last month, we've already got another 30 additional ratings in there. And of course, just in this past 2 weeks, we have a couple people who have left full-on reviews. I've read them word for word, and just want to say thank you to Kim Landwehr, Byron Friday, Music Teach 987, Johnny B. Truant, Pilot GT. Thank you guys very much for all the very kind things that you guys have said. And if you guys want to help the Podcast Answer Man get a little bit more recognition inside the iTunes store, you can go to podcastanswerman.com/iTunes link and leave us a review, or leave me a review, and I would very much appreciate it. And so with that, it is now time to move on to my interview with Michael Hyatt. All right, my friends, I am totally honored and psyched to have my good friend Michael Hyatt on the Podcast Answer Man. Michael, thank you for coming on to the show.
Oh, I'm so glad to do it, Cliff. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a quote in a book by Jason Fried, the guy behind 37 Signals, High Rise. I use them to manage all my life and business. And he wrote a book called Rework. Have you ever read this book before?
I have. I've read it a couple times and recommended it. Love it.
I'm gonna read one of my favorite quotes from this book, and I want to tell you where you fit in. And you're in good company when when you fit in this crowd of people. But anyway, this is what Jason Fried wrote, and it's called The Myth of the Overnight Sensation. He says, "You will not be a big hit right away. You will not get rich quick. You are not so special that everyone else will instantly pay attention. No one cares about you. At least not yet. Get used to it. You know those overnight success stories you've heard about? It's not the whole story. Dig deeper and you'll usually find people who have busted their butts for years to get into a position where things could take off. And on the rare occasion that instant success does come along, it usually doesn't last. There's no foundation there to support it. Trade the dream of overnight success for slow, measured growth. It's hard. You have to be patient. You have to grind it out. You have to do it for a long time before the right people notice. And the reason why I bring that up here, because I know you're going to be talking about platform. We're going to get into that in just a second. But I just want to say that in my journey of building my brand online and building my business online, Michael, I just want to say that for me, I'm very glad to tell you that you are one of those right people.
Thank you.
And what I mean by that, and it's in the crowd of people that I'm talking about are a Dan Miller, and David Foster, and a Michael Hyatt, and also I think it's Michael Stelzner over at Social Media Examiner. You know, these are the people who have established their brand, their presence, their platform online, and they have a massive following of people. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people who are following them already, and those people know, like, and trust you. And when somebody like you comes along and you say, wow, I found this guy named Cliff Ravenscraft, podcast Answer Man, and it blows me away, and this is why I really like what he's doing, and this is why you should check it out, and you blog about it, and you podcast about me, and the next thing you know, it's just this new wave of literally thousands of people every week coming in and checking out the site, checking out the tutorials. And I personally just want to say thank you for being one of those right people.
Well, you're welcome. It's an honor. I love sharing great resources with my friends and followers. So to tell my fans and to tell my friends and the people that follow me about you, I feel like I'm doing them a favor and I'm doing you a favor. And I love connecting people that I really respect. So it's an honor for me.
Well, Michael, I happen to know a lot about you because I've researched you. I've heard Dan Miller go on and on about your blog for years. And, obviously I'm a Christian as well. And so I've taken notice of quite a few books that are published by Thomas Nelson Publishing. Can you tell folks who maybe aren't familiar with Michael Hyatt a little bit about your story and how you've got to the place where you are today?
Yeah, I've spent basically my entire career, over 30 years in the book publishing industry. I started when I was a senior at Baylor University, and then I continued in that position when I finished. And, I've done every aspect of book publishing. I've done marketing, I've done editorial, management. Most recently, for 6 years, I was the CEO of Thomas Nelson, which is the largest faith-based publisher in the world, the oldest commercial publisher in the world, and the 7th largest book publisher in the U.S. So I've done it all. I've been a literary agent. I've written a couple of books before. Platform is actually my 6th book. And so I've seen every part of it. And the platform thing got really interesting to me because we were sending a lot of people away starting about 10 years ago who had compelling ideas. They had great manuscripts, but they didn't have a platform. They didn't have any way to get out the word. And as a publisher, we couldn't do it all for them.
So tell me about this book that you're writing right now. It's called Platform, and it is about, is it your story or is it more of a how-to to build your platform?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I certainly include my story throughout, but it's the book that I wish that I could have handed to every author, entertainer, politician, small business person, anybody who had a great idea but didn't know where to go with it. They didn't have a way to get the message out. The subtitle of the book is Get Noticed in a Noisy World. And man, the world has become increasingly noisy. When you think about the fact that in this last year alone, there were over 1 million new books published. I went on Amazon and did a search I don't remember what the term was, but I wanted to see how big their database is. They have 27 million books cataloged and for sale on Amazon. Then in addition to that, you've got like 164 million blogs that are live in the world. Not all of them active, but just a lot of noise, tons of video content, all kinds of games and apps and everything else. So how do you get your message, your cause, your brand, the thing that you care about, how do you get it noticed in a world like that where there's just an avalanche of information? And that's what the book is really about. And it's just step by step how to do it.
Well, you certainly build a platform for yourself, and your blog is something that I've heard mentioned again by Dan Miller for years. He's like, this is somebody who's written a blog that will give you leadership skills, just productivity tips. This is something that is a must-have resource. And so people like Dan Miller out there, and then of course, just in my other circles, just people talking about, here's another great blog post from michaelhyatt.com. How did you get noticed in that world? When did you start blogging, and how did you go about building that brand to where you now have well over 200,000 people who are subscribing?
Yeah, I guess it was really accidental at first. I thought in 2004, when I became the president of Thomas Nelson, I wasn't the CEO yet, but it was like one step below that. So I was the president. I said, I think I'm going to start just a blog, and really not to build a platform, but mainly a way for me to kind of disentangle my own thinking and a way to curate my best thinking and a way to pass it along. So I blogged from 2004 to 2007. 2 of those years I was the CEO because I got promoted to the CEO by the board in 2006. But I didn't attract more than 1,000 readers a month for those first 4 years. And, a lot of people say, well, it was easy for you to build a platform. You were the CEO. Look, nobody cared. I mean, not really. Nobody cared for at least the first 4 years. And in fact, I often say to people, how many CEOs do you read? Well, the answer is usually none, because CEOs by and large are boring. They don't have anything to say. They may be great at running companies, but they don't really have that much to say. So I felt like I had to kind of fight against that and be even more interesting in to get people's attention. But then in 2008, something dramatic happened. I hit an inflection point. I went from about 700 readers a month the year before to an average in 2008 of 20,000 readers. And that was primarily because I got super active in social media. Twitter's been around since 2006, but I came online in 2008. So I saw this dramatic inflection point. I also got picked up by Lifehacker on a couple posts, which brought in a flood of new traffic. In fact, they shut my server down twice just because of the incoming traffic. And then it went like to 43,000 average readers a month in 2009, and then 50,000 the next year. And, this last month I had over 300,000 unique visitors to my site, but it didn't happen all at once. And one of the things I find, Cliff, is that people often quit right before the inflection point. Yes, absolutely.
I'm listening to your story, and I've still got this quote. It says, "It's like, listen, Michael Hyatt, as a CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishing, you're not so special that everyone's going to instantly pay attention to you. No one cares about you, at least not yet. Get used to it." So that, because when you're not, I think about Michael Hyatt, I'm thinking, of course it's easy for him to blog because he obviously is in front of so many people as a CEO, and what he says is important. And this is new information to me, by the way, the fact that for the first 4 years of your blogging experience, less than 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, it was really incredible. And there were those times when I got discouraged. I wanted to quit. I wondered why I was doing this. All this stuff, by the way, I'm having to apply now to my own podcast. But, I kind of got it nailed over this period of time with my blogging. But it was tough. I had to find my voice. I had to be patient and wait for that. I think another big learning I got out of that, Cliff, and it's really paying in spades now with the launch of this new book platform, is you've got to build a platform before you need it. And I meet authors all the time, especially, but you meet small business people the same way. It's like they got a great idea and they go, okay, now I'm going to start building my platform. Well, the best time to build a platform would have been 5 years ago. But here's the key. The second best time to build a platform is today. Get started. You're going to need this sometime in the future. If you're going to get that idea, that dream that you have in your heart, if you're going to get it out, you've got to have a platform. It's the only way I know of, short of some network executive granting you a celebrity spot on a television show. Short of that, you're going to have to build your own platform. Good news is it's doable.
It is doable. In fact, I think that I just read in Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Crush It. We're rereading that for the podcast Mastermind. And one of the things he says, listen, even if you're employed, self-employed, and you enjoy your self-employment, you're not looking to build a business or anything like that, every single person out there needs to consider themselves as a brand.
Yes.
You need to create your own personal brand, and you need to stay competitive in the marketplace, even as staying on as an employee, gainfully employed. You definitely need to have something that you bring to the table, some kind of influence in the world. And that is something that I certainly see people struggling with, is the idea that I am a brand, that I am someone who has something valuable to say. Because how many books are out there? What about the people who aren't even looking to write a book? But you talk to somebody about creating a podcast or even a blog. How many millions of those are out there?
Yeah, that's right. And when you're talking about being a brand, really what you're talking about is being intentional about your reputation. What do you want to be known for? And one of the great things about a blog or about a podcast or about a book or something else is you're perceived as a thought leader, and it makes you more portable in terms of your career. If you get downsized or outsized or right-sized or whatever, you still got a future because your career is not all vested. Your platform is not all vested in your employer's platform. And that's what made it possible for me a year ago, about exactly a year ago. I was able to step out of Thomas Nelson as the CEO and pursue something that I had dreamed of for years, which was to write and to speak full time. The only reason I could do that is because I had grown this platform that made it possible.
One of the things that came up in the conversations and talking about building this platform, it's like, well, where do I start? Do I have to have some kind of, passion, some kind of niche focus? And they hear me even promoting this. It's one of my messages, if you will, is it's best if you can be clearly identifiable about, what is it that you're known for? For me, for a lot of people, if the term podcasting comes up, usually my name hopefully will come up in a conversation at one point in the journey. Or if my name comes up, somebody will ultimately end up talking about podcasting. That's just a part of the game. But what if people out there don't know what their specific focus is, what their niche is? I came up with a great question, I think, that you can use to develop your online identity, your brand, if you will. And that is to ask yourself, what is my message? What is the message I want to share with the world? And that way it's not necessarily, focused on podcasting, because honestly, a lot of people say, gosh, Cliff Ravenscraft, your brand, you are the podcast answer man. And for thousands of people, I am. But I'm actually excited to say that not for everybody, because there are literally, actually, I think 13,000 people. If they heard the name Cliff Ravenscraft, you know what they would hear? That's that guy who does podcasts with his wife, Stephanie, about the Hunger Games. Mm-hmm. Or it's that guy who does Family from the Heart, or it's that guy who does these other shows. So I have multiple brands, but I think what I found is that while I have different brands, I use my platform, which is my blog, my podcast, my Twitter, my social media presence, to broadcast my greater message, which is a message of entertainment, education, encouragement, and a source of inspiration to the world.
Which you're definitely doing. And I told you even before we started recording this, that's one of the main reasons I listen to Podcast Answer Man. I love it. I recommend it for all the technical stuff, for the instruction, but the inspiration is the thing that I love. And you carry that. I've heard some of your other podcasts. You carry you into every one of those podcasts. And that's what I'm going to get out of any of those podcasts, regardless of the subject matter specialization. So kudos to you. You've done a great job building a brand.
Well, let's talk about your book. When does it come out, and how can people get their hands on it to where not only will it benefit them, that's a no-brainer. I can tell you folks, just from knowing Michael and the amount of inspiration I've received from him, you're going to benefit from this book. But I want to make sure that if our audience goes out there and grabs this book, that we can benefit you as well. How can we best do that?
Well, the best way to do this is to buy it from any major retailer. And you can actually go to my website, and I've got links to this, and I'm going to tell you why it's important to go there first here in just a second. But it's michaelhyatt.com/platform. michaelhyatt.com/platform. And the reason it's important to do it this week is because, quite honestly, I'm trying to drive the bestseller list. I would love the book to get on the bestseller list. And that's all about how many books we can drive through retail in a given 1 week time frame. So for people that buy it this week, and forward to me their receipt. So if it's an online retailer from Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, whatever it is, forward the receipt to gifts@michaelhyatt.com, and I'll forward to you a link to 7 free bonuses that are worth $375.98. I tried to over-deliver on this, Cliff, to create the most value I could to make people wait, frankly, to buy it during this week, but also to help me try to drive the bestseller list. And in exchange for them waiting, I tried to create this value. So it's got, for example, all the electronic editions of the book. So you get the Kindle, Nook, the iPad, PDF, plus you get the complete unabridged audiobook, plus a 6-part video series called the Platform Video Jumpstart. And there's some other goodies in there too. But 7 bonuses only this week. That offer's going away on the 25th of May at the end of the day, because our drive to the bestseller list will either be done or not by that time.
So, and let's define this week, because I am going to be releasing this podcast episode on, let's see here, it'll be Thursday, May 17th. So what we're talking about is actually starting on Monday, May 21st. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Monday, May the 21st. And if you're afraid that you're going to miss this, you can go to that same website I gave you, michaelhyatt.com/platform. And that's just kind of a holding page, but you can sign up to be notified. First thing I'm going to do, it's going to go out at about midnight on the 21st, is I'm going to send an email blast to everybody saying, okay, remember, now you can go buy it and forward the receipt. And it'll give you explicit instructions there.
Yeah, so I just want to encourage everyone, go anytime between Monday, May 21st through Friday, May 25th, and buy this book. Now, let me ask you, if somebody buys it from the Kindle, does that count towards the top seller list?
Well, yeah, it does. And I'm actually not trying to be too particular about this. I don't care if you get it from a local retailer or it's an electronic edition, just forward to me the receipt, because I think, the more books we sell, the better. And the New York Times has a distinctive electronic edition bestseller list, and then they also have the physical copy. I don't really care. I could drive myself crazy trying to be particular about that, but
I know you don't care, but I think from what I understand, the big New York Times bestseller list, that's usually the physical book and not the digital. So what I want to do,
they have 2 lists actually.
So they do have 2 lists now.
Yep, they do. Yep.
Well, here's what I want to recommend for the podcast Answer Man audience, because I know they're going to go out and do this. My recommendation: go out and order the physical book, and of course you can order the physical book on Amazon still, or any of the other places that you have linked up over at michaelhyatt.com/platform. Order the physical book, and then send your receipt. As long as you do this before Friday, May 25th. Send that receipt to gifts@michaelhyatt.com, and you get all of the Kindle versions, the iPad version, and all the other versions.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So everybody do me a favor and Michael a favor and get the physical book Monday, May 21st through Friday, May 25th. That's what I would love to have people do for you.
Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. And I want to talk real briefly about your podcast. I'm thankful that we have about another 9 minutes left. I want to talk about this podcast that you've launched. Tell us a little bit about This Is Your Life.
Well, I started this podcast really at the insistence or the encouragement of Dan Miller. And I asked Dan in a meeting I had with him, I said, if everything burned down in your life and you had to recreate your life and your business from one thing, what would be the one thing that had so much value that you would make sure that you had that? And he said, oh, that's easy, my podcast. I thought, wow. I mean, for me, I would have answered before that, my blog. And so I said to Dan, I said, why? And he said, because a podcast is so much more intimate than a blog, because you're inside somebody's head via headphones. That doesn't get much more intimate than that. And he said he had found that the audience was much more engaged and just kind of his super fans. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give that a try. So I started this blog, this podcast, and I wanted to kind of build it around the brand I'd already built around intentional living and about thinking thoughtfully about your life. And I loved this song, This Is Your Life. And I thought, I'm going to kind of be basing it on that and just talk about whatever I want to talk about, but mostly about more purposeful living. So I launched that back in February. I think I'm to episode 12 went out today. And I've told you offline, Cliff, it's been one of the hardest things, most difficult things I've ever done.
And tell us, why is that?
I think it's probably true for starting anything. It just takes a lot of practice. It takes trying to find your voice. I mean, you were incredible in helping me getting launched. And I went through your instructional materials. I bought several of them. Those were very helpful on the technical side. And then I hired you as a consultant to come in after that. And that was hugely helpful. I mean, the value you were worth, I shouldn't tell you this, but you were worth 10 times what I paid you.
I'm so thankful to hear that. Thank you.
Because I mean, if I hadn't paid you that fee, I would have had to learn on my own, and the learning curve would have been a lot longer and a lot uglier. And I'm still on a learning curve, but you shortened it immensely. So yeah, so I think the hard part of it is just getting comfortable doing it. I mean, you said to me, "Look, dude, you got to stop standing up. This isn't a lecture. You got to sit down. It's a conversation." I mean, you were more gracious than that, but that was kind of the takeaway. And so I started doing some of those things. You said, you've got to be more transparent. And I still have a long way to go on that, but that was helpful as well. So I just feel like, like if you start to play guitar and you're starting to learn the scales, it seems very deliberate and it's difficult at first until you develop some facility with it where you can improvise. It's the same thing with podcasting or blogging. And I'm just in that really tough spot where I feel like I'm putting in 10 units of effort for every unit of productive podcasting.
Well, I just want to encourage you because I know that it is very discouraging at first to get up and running. One of the things I shared with you, and I don't think I've ever shared this on Podcast Answer Man before, or if I have, it's been a very long time. But one of the things that I shared with you is that out of the last 50 episodes of Podcast Answer Man, as far as I'm concerned, probably about 45 out of the 50, I've thought, this isn't worthy of being put out. This is nowhere near what I wished this podcast would be. I always consistently say, man, I really wish I would have spent another hour or two preparing to answer the 3 questions that I answered today, instead of just speaking off the top of my head. Was there value? Maybe, but at the same time, I feel like I only shared from my experience. I really should have gone in and done a little research and had a little bit more technical detail involved. But at the same time, that's out of the last 50 episodes of Podcast Answer Man. I felt horrible, honestly, about releasing those episodes. However, people like you, Dan Miller, and hundreds of other people are like, wow, another great episode of Podcast Answer Man. Thank you so much. This is so inspirational. That's exactly what I needed. And I'm thinking, seriously? And of course, occasionally I go back and I listen to the episode and I'm like, that wasn't so bad. Why was I giving myself such a hard time?
I don't know if you've read Stephen Pressfield's book or any of his books, but he's got a book called The War of Art, which is must reading. But one of the things he talks about is that when you endeavor to do anything creatively, that this thing called the resistance with a capital R steps forward and it just opposes you. And, he's not a spiritual person. It's not intended to be a spiritual metaphor, but he just says there's this thing that makes you want to quit, makes it tougher than it probably really is. But if you can fight through that, you'll find that you'll create a lot of value and help a lot of people. And so I know that's true in blogging. I'm believing it by faith as I'm doing my podcasting now.
Well, Michael, I took a special interest in your podcast, and honestly, a lot of the early interest was the fact that I'd heard so many things about you, and you had, I guess, been recommended to me by Dan Miller and maybe somebody else. I'm not sure, but you had already taken some of my tutorials. You had purchased some things there, and so I immediately, it's like, wait a second, I've heard so much about this Michael Hyatt. I've got to check this guy out. And so I took a little bit of interest in your podcast just because of the recommendation of people that I follow in my circles who look so highly up to you. And I listened to the podcast and I'm like, yeah, this is good content, but this, yeah, I don't know that I would subscribe to this podcast right now. And it was tough because I felt like I was listening to recordings of lectures. It's the same reason why, my great friend, and I think you knew him as well, David Foster.
Yes.
Loved that man. I loved that man and I miss him tremendously. But I listened to his Renegade's Guide to God podcast, and I could go back and listen to every one of them from beginning to the end, and just listen to them all over again. But you know what? I don't like to go and listen to his sermons on Sundays. In his podcast, I mean. I don't like to listen to the audio of his podcast. Now, here's the thing. His preaching was amazing. His preaching is awesome. And occasionally what I'll do is I will go back and I'll download the video, and sometimes I'll put it up on the TV screen and I'll watch it. But for me, listening to a prepared speech and that has been spoken to a large crowd, it doesn't carry that same appeal. And so those were some of the things that you and I talked about. But after you and I had met, you had changed a few things. I think it was around episode 6 or 7.
Yeah, I can't remember, but it's dramatic. If people go back and listen, you'll know when Cliff had his major influence, because everything changed.
And here's the deal. I never really give that false encouragement and say things just to make people feel better. Sometimes I wish I was a little bit more gracious with the things that I say, and I don't share how I feel all the time, but I do. And matter of fact, I'm second guessing the fact that I just shared with everybody that I didn't like the first couple episodes of your show, and I feel horrible about that already.
No, it's good. But it's true. I didn't like him either.
But here's the deal, though. After I came down there, that next episode you put out the next week, ever since then, your podcast has made it to, I will say, the top 10 of all podcasts I've ever subscribed to.
Wow.
And that's a very short list, and I've listened to, over the years, I've subscribed to probably over 100 different podcasts that I was insanely interested in. But your show is actually moved up into a category of, when a new episode comes in, I'm going to listen to that within 2 or 3 days of it coming out. There will never be a time where there'll be 2 episodes that have been unheard on my podcast listening list from you. And I just want to tell people, if you guys want to check out Michael's podcast, there is one podcast episode I believe you must go check out, and I think you'll fall in love with it. It's episode number 10. It was put out last week, and it was called How to Shave 10 Hours Off Your Work Week. And I literally just listened to it one time. I didn't take notes. I just listened to it one time, and I have shaved at least 10, maybe closer to 15 to 20 hours off of my work week since listening to that podcast.
That blows me away, and it's such an encouragement to me. I may even do another episode. Awesome.
Well, and here's this is where the reason why I want to make a point to share that with you, Michael, is because you think about that 10 units of energy that you put into that podcast, that what has happened to my life, and I'm just one person. What has happened to my life, the impact that one episode has had is immeasurable to me. You talk about the value, you talk about the value of how much you paid for my coaching or whatever for that day. And now all of a sudden, how I can't even begin to tell you, I don't even know if I could put a dollar value on how much that means to me, to know that I can actually walk out of this office at 5:00 in the afternoon or in the evening, and then go out and do stuff with my family. And if I do stuff with my family, that I don't feel the need or the urgency to come back and work a couple more hours to make up that time.
That encourages me more than you know. I mean, that's huge.
And you're having that impact on people. And here's the thing, and because I've had some people email me, and I've actually been following the comments on your podcast episodes from time to time, and especially when you announced that you were going to change some things and that you were changing some things. And I saw plenty of people out there who actually said, hey, I don't know what anybody's talking about. That Cliff Ravenscraft's off his rocker, because I so enjoyed the last 5 episodes. This is great. I hope you don't change anything. And they never really said Cliff was off his rocker, but they said, you know what? Hey, you're making a difference. And I think that's the thing that we as podcasters, I think we never understand and comprehend the value of what we are bringing to the table.
I think that's something we can't lose sight of either, because I'll tell you what, we lose our way when we lose our why. And that's a direct quote from my wife, and I love it. But to realize what's at stake, we can get so caught up on the technical side of it or the preparation side of it, and we forget that we're speaking to real people who on the other end of that podcast have real lives and real things that they're facing, who need inspiration, who need encouragement, who may want to quit. And if we can just speak to them like we'd like to be spoken to, because we're all in that situation, that's a good reminder to me. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I think it's a reminder for all of us, actually, because I need to be reminded of that myself. Well, my friends, the book is called Platform. Again, I encourage you to head over to michaelhyatt.com/platform. Again, purchase that book anytime between Monday, May 21st through Friday the 25th. I encourage you to buy it in physical form from one of the retailers listed on that website. And then, of course, remember, send your receipt to gifts@michaelhyatt.com, and they will get you access to all of the digital copies, plus a whole plethora of other valuable stuff that you're going to be able to see during that week that website is officially opened up to everybody. But Michael, I am so excited that our paths have crossed. Again, you personally and your podcast has had a profound impact on my life. And then for those of you who love to read, if you are looking for another blog, or even if you are maybe maxed out on your blogs, you need to kick somebody else off of your list and go over to michaelhyatt.com and put that one on there. So, Michael, thank you so much for coming on the podcast Answer Man.
Thank you, Cliff. Thanks for being so generous.
Well, my friends, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the podcast Answer Man. You know, this is one of those things, you know, you just don't know how things are going to go in an interview. And sometimes you say things, it's like, man, here's the deal. I'm recording the ending of this episode the day after recording that interview. And I want to tell you, I lost a little sleep last night wondering, should I edit the part out where I said that one thing? You know, and not only did I lose a little sleep last night, I woke up this morning and all I could think about, should I go edit it? Should I go edit it? Instead, I decided to go out and get my physical activity done by working out on the treadmill this morning and doing some other things to prepare for the rest of the show. And I chose at the end of the day, or at this point in the day, that no, I'm not going to edit it. I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to be real. I'm going to be myself. And am I happy with everything I said? No. But I think there's extreme value in the interview, and especially, you know, just you know, for me personally, there's one thing that Michael said. I had no idea that he went 4 years of blogging and only had less than 1,000 subscribers. And, you know, I tell you what, I hope that you guys do get his book. I really do. Hey, real quickly, I also want to let you know, and I forgot to mention this in the interview with him, but Michael is actually going to be speaking at Blog World and New Media Expo in just a couple short weeks. If you have not signed up, there's still time to do so. You can head over to blogworldexpo.com, click to register, use promo code GSPN10 for 10% off. And if you want, you can actually attend Michael's session at Blog World, which is actually going to happen on Thursday, June 7th at 9 a.m. Anyway, real quickly, last thing I want to say is thank you to those of you who have been using my Bluehost affiliate sign up for signing up for your hosting account. You can find out all of my thoughts on hosting at podcastanswerman.com/hosting. And the people behind, sanepublications.com, that's SAIN, sanepublications.com. And then throughhikerpodcast.com, that's THRU hikerpodcast.com. endtimepodcaster.com, my good friend Santos Ali there. And then funinwichita.com. All four of those domains, all four of the people behind them used my affiliate code to sign up for their hosting with Bluehost. And my friends, I do earn a very generous commission each time someone does that. So personal thanks to each and every one of you. I'm out of here for this episode. This is one of those episodes, like I told Michael, I'm not sure. It's, you know, if on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, I personally feel what I bring to the table today right around a solid 6.5. But you know what? I hope that you enjoy it. I'll talk to you next week. Until then, take everything to the next level.